the intersection between ADHD and executive functioning, as well as obesity and eating disorders. And it's ADHD Awareness Month. So if you have, if you struggle with attention deficit or executive functioning disorders yourself, if you have a loved one that does, please take just a couple of notes. I'm going to give you some tips to take away. And I think so many people struggle with obesity and weight management and don't understand that it's their executive functioning. I always point to the front part of the brain when I talk about executive functioning. It's the ADHD, it's the fallout from these that are actually creating the problem. So since I specialize in all things cognitive at this point, I'm actually considered a neuropsychotherapist and naturopathic doctor, but a psychotherapist that focuses specifically on how the brain behavior is playing into the therapeutic process. I really want to talk to people about this idea of, well, how do you manage your brain? How do you manage your brain as it relates to food? Okay, so I want you to make note of what executive functioning actually is. So what is executive functioning? And ADHD, you cannot be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. ADD is what the way you used to refer to ADHD when it didn't have the hyperactive component to it. Now it's ADHD and attentive type is how you say that, okay? But you can't have a diagnosis of ADHD without executive functioning impairment, okay? So you can't be diagnosed with ADHD without executive functioning impairment. And so what is executive functioning? So I put a post up that when I was actually talking about doing this pop-up, and it was explaining what executive functioning is, but I want to go over what that is, okay? So when I'm talking about it, and for today's talk, I want you to be thinking about these 6 domains. So you're going to think about activation, focus, effort, emotion, memory, and action. So those are our buckets, okay? So we're talking about those 6 buckets. And so when I'm working with people, I'm constantly trying to figure out where they have more of their issues with ADHD or executive functioning with those buckets. So to be clear, people will say they think they have focusing issues or they have ADHD, but they don't have a formal diagnosis. You can have problems with an executive functioning disorder and not have ADHD. So you could have an impairment to your executive functioning, but not have ADHD. So that's totally possible, okay? And if you have other types of diagnoses, if you've had a head injury, if you have some sort of infection, if you have an autoimmune disorder, all of those things can affect your executive function. So if you have a diagnosis of depression or bipolar disorder, you would have executive function impairment. If you have, if you've had traumatic brain injury, you could have executive functioning impairment. And then all of the inflammatory processes, and I was talking about these in my talk yesterday, can affect executive functioning. So with that being said, how does this have anything to do with weight? How does this have anything to do with obesity? How does this relate to eating disorders? That's a lot of what I end up having to work through with people. And it's important to understand the way your brain works so that you can have a leg up on dealing with these issues, okay? And the answer to that question is it has a whole heck of a lot to do with obesity. It has a whole heck of a lot to do with your ability to actually not only lose weight, but keep the weight off. So if you historically have struggled with your weight, if you have historically struggled with keeping your weight off long term, you really want to consider these executive functioning impairments. And then go back and think about some of the things that I was saying in the previous talk, the one that I did yesterday. All of these things come together and affect, your ability to take care of your health. I have a model of treatment that I use that I've created that actually is a 3-legged stool. And I find that when people are trying to get a handle on their health, or if they're trying to get a handle on their mental health, or if they know they have attention deficit and they're trying to get a handle on that, their stool is wobbly, their treatment stool is wobbly. And so you need to make sure that your stool is balanced when it comes to neurological, is balanced when it comes to physiological, and is balanced when it comes to psychological. A lot of times what people will do is, if they're trying to lose weight, for example, they just do the physiological. Or they may look at the physiological, so changing the diet, let me get on some supplements, let me do the exercise piece, but they never think about needing coaching. Or looking at the psychological piece, right? So that's one leg that might be wobbly. Rarely do I get people who come to me and they already know that they need to do those two legs and the neurological leg. The neurological leg is the leg that I'm talking to you about right now, okay? When you do all three, your stool is very stable. And long-term weight loss and long-term overcoming of an eating disorder is quite possible. And I see that constantly in private practice. When I work with people, especially anybody who's come into my practice over the last year and a half, it is using that three-leg stool to make sure that they're super stable. Okay, so what are we looking at here? So I told you the 6 categories for executive functioning. The first one is activation. So when you're looking at activation, you're thinking about, do you organize well? Do you know how to prioritize? And do you know how to initiate? Are you able to start something, or do you tend to procrastinate? Okay, and that can be a huge factor if you think about it when it comes to weight loss, weight management, and eating disorders. Focus. Can you sustain attention to a task? A lot of times when I talk to people, and this is going to be under that focus category, when I talk to people about their weight management and their health, they get bored. Getting bored on a program is a big issue for a lot of people, and it could be just that this area of focus is one that's not very strong. What about effort? Regulating alertness, sustaining effort, and your processing speed, okay? Maybe you don't have a lot of overall energy to maintaining a program. Maybe sustaining effort's not something that you have historically done very well. That's actually something that goes on with the front part of the brain. Managing frustration and modulating emotions, that's under that emotion bucket. So if you struggle with the executive function that is emotion, you're going to have a hard time with emotional eating. Or when it comes to an eating disorder, not just weight management, you may find that you're constantly triggered around your emotions, okay? So what you're hearing is executive functioning has a whole heck of a lot to do with your success with managing your weight and also disordered eating, okay? Another one, memory. Memory was that other category, utilizing working memory and accessing recall. All right, so memory. A lot of times I'll say to people, remember the process, or remember your whys, or remember the steps, or what you're supposed to do in a situation. But if you have a problem with working memory when it comes to executive function, that actually will create issues. So if you're in the middle of somebody's brought something to work and you're in the middle of trying to figure out, well, do I want to do this or do I not want to eat this? And your working memory is glitchy, you may not remember what you're supposed to do in a situation like this. And that's where executive functioning and ADHD can definitely run into managing the weight or disordered eating. Lastly, action. Monitoring and self-regulating action, okay? So what I often find is it's hard for people with executive functioning issues or ADHD to self-monitor. There's not a lot of self-awareness. There is a lot of self-blindness. So there's this issue of not understanding why you find yourself in certain situations constantly, why you feel the way you do, why you respond the way that you do, or not even being able to see yourself properly. Okay, so there's not an objectivity about your behavior. You're so in it, you can't actually see it well. So this is how executive functioning impairment makes it hard to manage weight and is related to disordered eating behaviors, okay? So that's the connection, all right? So then what do you do about it? And then what are other things that make people who have ADHD or executive functioning more vulnerable to struggling with weight, okay? So if you look at how ADHD works, ADHD is an executive functioning impairment, but it's also an impairment of the reward system, the front part of the brain. So that front part of the brain is constantly looking for a reward hit. So I find that my ADHD clients typically will have some sort of compulsive behavior, right? It's going to be sugar, but it could be other things. It could be even more problematic than sugar. It could be alcohol. It could be drugs. It could be spending. It could be gambling. I've had clients struggle with pornography and all kinds of other addictions, infidelity, because the front part of the brain has such a low dopamine state. It's looking for things constantly to kind of pull it up. It could be staying up too late, anything that gives it a hit. So when you're thinking about food, spinning, yes. And if you're thinking about with food though, sugar, rich foods, things that give your brain a bit of a buzz. So when I go to take these foods away, one of the things that starts to happen is people will report feeling depressed. Right? Because it's not that I didn't do anything bad with the diet, but I took away the high. So I took away not only the dopamine high, but I also took away the serotonin high. A lot of times, if you like really high carbohydrate foods, really rich foods, you're also getting a serotonin bump as well. And serotonin makes you feel calm and happy. So if you impulsively are seeking dopamine rich foods, or foods that bump your dopamine levels, you're probably also picking carbohydrate-rich foods. So when I ask you to go on a lower whatever program, it feels bad because I'm taking away the serotonin and the dopamine high. And you have to know that. If you have attention deficit or executive functioning impairment, when you go to change your diet, initially it feels good, but when the novelty wears off, your brain may not have as much of a high as it used to have. And that causes a lot of problems for people. So you have to know what to do with that. That is why my programs are built the way that they're built. They're designed to help keep the front brain really propped up, because people will report they don't even want to eat. They'd rather skip meals than to eat the boring food that's on program after a while, right? And it's because of this issue. Now, one thing I want to say about ADHD, and this isn't something I will talk about right now, but many ADHDers, it's not an issue of not being able to attend or focus. It's a matter of not focusing on things that aren't interesting. So if an ADHDer finds something that's interesting, they'll focus on it just fine, to the point of hyper-focusing. So they don't regulate focus well. They focus too much or too little. And that's the issue with ADHD. So if you are hyper-focusing, I find this a lot with people who get into a flow at work, or they get into a flow with something that's really interesting, they stop eating. They'll skip a meal. And when they finally come out of their hyper-focus, they realize they're ravenous, and then they might binge eat or emotionally eat, okay? Which is a huge problem. So in this moment, what I will say, because that's one of the biggest things that I do with my ADHD clients that struggle with food, is I put them on a schedule. I don't care if they're hungry or not. I'm trying to override that neurological leg of the stool. So you have to eat at a scheduled time. You eat by your watch. You eat by the clock. You don't eat based on how you feel. Because eating based on how you feel when you have ADHD or executive functioning issues will really get you into trouble. So eat on a schedule is my biggest tip if you think you have ADHD or some executive functioning impairment. You eat 3 times a day. You put 6 hours in between the meals, 4 to 6 hours, in between the meals, and you just eat by that clock. And I have said this in I don't know how many videos, but I will say it again. You eat high protein, high fiber meals, because an ADHD brain, and I know if you have a child that has attention deficit, all they want to eat is carbohydrates, and that's just how it goes. But ADHD brains need lots of protein and they need lots of fiber to stabilize blood sugar. So if your child only wants to eat macaroni and cheese and French fries and potato chips, you've got to figure out a way to get protein in, because that really stabilizes their neurology, and they need to know how to work with their special brain. Same thing with adults. So kiss of death is skipping meals. Kiss of death is eating high carbohydrate, low protein meals. And again, that is why the programs that I put together, the Crave Detox Lifestyle program, is designed the way it is designed. It is perfect for the brain and perfect for the hormones, okay? That program is 50% off until Halloween right now. So it's 50% off of the Crave Detox Lifestyle. Okay, so another thing I want to speak to with ADHD brain, so I'm giving you a second tip here, is they do really well on a high omega diet. So high fish oil, essential fatty acid diet, okay? So you need to eat good, healthy fats. The brain is 80% fat. Sex hormones are very much building based on fat, but in an ADHD brain, you need fish oil. And if you don't eat animal protein, you need a vegetarian version of these omegas, okay? But you have got to get healthy fats in. So the recommended diet, because I work with brains across the spectrum. So I am certified to work with Alzheimer's and dementia clients, and I'm certified and trained to work with ADHD children and adults. I love working with people's brains because I have found that most of the time what we think is a mood disorder or an addictive behavior is fallout from some problem with the neurological piece of things. And when you work on the function of the neurology, a lot of these other things will remedy themselves, okay? So you have to use a Mediterranean type of diet or a paleo type of diet for all of these brain types. So whether it's ADHD, whether you are worried about memory and dementia or whatever it is, a healthy brain needs, across the age groups, needs fish oil, okay? So all of my meal plans, I'll encourage healthy fats. I'll encourage avocados and olive oil. You need to be eating nuts, not roasted nuts, but raw nuts. Fish oil and healthy fats are super important for an ADHD brain. So that's a big one. That is my second big takeaway when it comes to, so what do I do? You're telling me my brain's going to have a harder time, Dr. Tiffany. What do I do? Well, that's what you would do. Okay. So you've got a couple of things already. Eat on a schedule and make sure you're having protein and fiber. So that's one. And then make sure you're taking a fish oil and you have healthy fats in your diet. Okay. Because when I go to work with people on their diet and I say, well, you need to be on a schedule, and it's like, well, the whole diagnosis of ADHD is I don't organize well, and I'm not good at being on a schedule, and I'm not good at planning, I'm not good at preparing, because those are executive functions. You have to start to kind of build this thing from the bottom up. Okay, so I give people basic rules, and I strongly encourage using some sort of timing system using a clock. Okay, let me see what else I wanted to make sure of. Sugar, I've already said this, a high sugar diet. One of the problems with a high sugar, high carbohydrate diet is it's almost kind of a weakening of the front brain. So once that serotonin is super high, which is what those carbohydrates and sugar will increase, it actually makes it harder for you to be as sharp. So you want to be doing things that actually make the brain sharper. When I put together an ADHD diet, I like lots of high protein, healthy fats and vegetables in the morning. And then I give my ADHD clients their carbohydrates at night. That's really good for stress hormones. It's really good for sleeping because ADHD brains don't go to bed well. They don't sleep well. They tend to be night owls. So if I give them their carbohydrates at night, it calms their brain down a little bit. So that's a technique that you can use if you have an ADHD child who you're having to use melatonin with or something like that. Kind of orient the day where the protein is high in the morning. These kids do not want to start the day with Pop-Tarts and bowls of cereal. It is a disaster. And if they're doing distance learning, they're going to be completely unfocused. So you really want to try to give them some sort of protein in the morning, and then later in the day is when they get their carbohydrates. It works out better. They'll get used to it. They'll be miserable initially, but they will get used to it. Okay, let me see what else I wanted to make sure of. Oh yes, impulsivity. Okay. So I've already talked about executive functioning. One thing that just is a kind of a throwaway idea here is you want to make sure you have healthy foods easily available. The Crave Detox bar is kind of like, I have so many ADHD men in my practice who just buy the bars because that keeps them from doing the wrong thing when they're out and about in their day. You want snacks like that. You want jerky, nuts, like low glycemic fruits with jerky, those kinds of things just out that you can see, okay? I'm a big fan of cacao. That's why I made the Crave Detox bar, and I'll answer that in a minute. And thank you. Please ask questions, everyone. You want cacao. The reason I use that in the Crave Detox bar is because it's really good for the brain. It's getting colder right now, so if you want to have hot chocolate or cacao available, that's a really good one that pops up the front part of the brain. But make sure your healthy snacks are somewhere you can see them. And then the treats or things that your kids or yourself aren't going to be consuming on a regular basis need to be out of sight, because the impulsivity of the ADHD brain, especially later in the day, is that it will grab what it sees out. So you really want to put things out of sight. Okay, so we're eating kind of, I said every 4 to 6 hours, stabilizing blood sugar, setting specific times to eat, and the importance of the quality of the food, and then a couple of other things I want to give you, and then I'll answer that question that we've got there. Protein schedule. Okay, omega. So the three things I did not say that are super important for managing an ADHD brain. You have to make sure you're getting enough sleep. You have to. The ADHD brain and the older brains that I was talking about earlier, it's really important that they're sleeping properly. Detoxification happens at night, and the brain is just going to be even glitchier if we're not getting a full night's rest. Meditation, and I know that is so hard, so please find an app, use that app. The front brain needs to practice being attentive. It needs to put in reps almost. So you want to be meditating, even if it's just 3 to 5 minutes a day. You want to practice meditating and then getting used to that being something that you're doing. That will slow down the impulsivity around food. The prefrontal cortex will get thicker. Research has shown that you can thicken the front part of the brain with meditation, and you can be deep in prayer, and that can be your meditation, but you have to be doing something on a regular basis to thicken that front brain. Exercise. If I could prescribe one thing, it would be to exercise. And remember, I said I work with brains across the lifespan. My 9-year-olds, my 6-year-olds, my 14 and 16-year-olds, I need them exercising to manage their ADHD and their executive functioning issues. My adults, I need them doing cardiovascular work, and I need them lifting weights. My older clients that are dealing with dementia and memory issues and trying to prevent Alzheimer's, they are exercising, they are lifting weights, they are walking. Everybody has to exercise. Brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, is super important, and it's a result of exercise. It's like miracle grow for the brain. So you only get that when you exercise. So I personally feel like the front part of my brain does not turn on unless I break a sweat and I get some blood flow going on a daily basis. Yes, it's great for weight loss. Yes, it's great for your waistline. But guess what? If you're exercising, then you're overcoming the ADHD and the executive functioning issues. So then your brain works better. So then you can stick to your plan, you can be more organized, and then you'll actually lose weight. So that's why I say, if you understand the neurological piece of this, and then you add in the physiological piece, and then you've got that psychological piece, you're unstoppable. You can lose weight and you can keep weight off. But when you don't do these things, you're doing one piece of this, one leg of the stool, you're wobbly, you don't lose weight or you don't keep weight off. So my clients, I have massive weight losses in my practice at this very moment, 100 and 125 pound weight losses. And it's because people are working in this process on a regular basis, and I'm holding them accountable to it. And then they're managing their brains a lot better. But also overcoming eating disorders, whether it's bulimia or managing anorexia or binge eating disorder, doing these things helps. The Crave Detox Lifestyle Program is based on these aspects of things and doing these pieces. Okay, I think I said it. So protein, schedule, omegas, sleep, meditation, exercise. I think I talked about all the things. I explained what executive functioning is. So please go back to the beginning of this. And then I explained dopamine and serotonin and the reward piece. Okay, and I'll talk more about ADHD before the month's out. Protein in the morning. Can we have cereal at night, or should it be cut out altogether? So it's a great question. It depends on the quality of the protein. Of the carbohydrates in cereal. I don't like sugar for many people because it's so high inflammatory. So that was what I was saying in my previous video. So if you're going to have cereal, you want it to be a healthier cereal. If it's a high sugar cereal like Frosted Flakes or Fruit Loops or something like that, that's a dessert. That's a treat. That's not actually something that you would want the kids eating or for you to be consuming on a regular basis. So it would have to be something really clean to have it. And if you're going to have a really clean cereal in the morning, or if you're going to do like oatmeal in the morning, you can do that. You just have to pair it with the protein. So if this is the kids and they're going to have like a small bowl of like Cheerios or some sort of gluten, because I'm not a fan of gluten for ADHD brains either. So some sort of gluten-free cereal. You would pair that with like some turkey bacon or turkey sausage or chicken sausage, something like that. They need some sort of protein. I have a lot of my kids that will drink, there's a shake called OWYN, OWYN, and it has a bunch of vegetables in it, and it's a vegan protein shake that's already pre-made. So some of my kiddos will do that, and they'll do a carbohydrate with that. I don't care. Some of them are eating popcorn, and I'm not crazy about corn, but I'm much more okay with corn than I am gluten. So some of them they're in a hurry because some of them are going to schools. Yes, OWYN. They'll have the shake and they'll have some popcorn, or they'll have a handful of dry cereal, and at least we check the box of protein and carbohydrate. So yeah, I mean, if I had my way, I've got some kids that will have like a gluten-free bread, and then they'll have like some turkey bacon, and they'll have some grass-fed butter on the bread, or if they can have eggs, they can have eggs and their gluten-free toast, and those things kind of come together. With the kids being at home, they can have real meals. With it being so hectic, and some of the kids are in school, a lot of my kiddos will have shakes. I'm a big fan of shakes because of that. And I'm talking about shakes that the parents will make. So they'll have, let me make sure I'm seeing the questions. They'll have a shake with a vegan protein powder, a healthy fat source, some fruit, and then one of my girls, she'll have like some gluten-free toast and almond butter on top of it. These kids, if you just, they'll wear y'all out at the beginning, but then eventually you wear them down and they'll do what you need them to do, and they'll adapt. They'll develop a taste for it. It's when you go back and forth that it's very hard for them. Now, if this is for you though, oh, she has a nut allergy. Can you suggest some snacks, meditation, eat 4 hours? Okay. Hello. Snacks for, what are my kids eating? They're, she has a nut allergy, so we can still, so hold on. You're going to have to do things like jerky, if she'll do jerky, snacks, jerky, sunflower seeds. Like my bar, I hate to just be like, she can eat my bar, but my bar has sunflower seeds in it. I don't know if she could do that. And she needs something like the Crave Detox bar, because they'll eat the bars as well. This bar doesn't have any nuts, but I don't know if she can do coconut. You need protein, fat, carbohydrate. That's what you're looking for. And so that would be a simple thing, or like a little wrap or something like that. Avocado is a good fat. Yeah, Tadisha, that's a good one. So it's a little bit harder because we do rely on some of the nut butters, but I would probably do like some sort of wrap. If she can do hummus, so a gluten-free wrap, some sort of like a nitrite-free organic turkey. And then like Tadisha was saying, she could do avocado or hummus in that if she'll do that. And that's easy. my bar, because that's easy for me to say. Thoughts if, another allergies. Ooh, you poor things with these allergies. What's recommended? We try berries and oatmeal. See, and that's why I do what I do, because a lot of this, no one can eat anything anymore. Okay, so if you can't do dairy though, I mean, I'm not crazy about dairy for anything that's neurodevelopmental or neurological anyway. I think it irritates the brain. So the dairy is not as much of an issue. The no nuts, it's the same kind of thing. It's, you're trying to find, whole food options, you know. Somebody was saying like the jerky. I like nitrite-free jerkies. And then baby carrots and like hummus, those types of things. The nice thing is when your kids have these sensitivities, or when you guys do, then you really have to try to clean up, and you end up eating whole foods, which is better for their brains anyway, but it does require that you're a little bit more savvy and strategic. But just lean into real food more. And I think some of the wraps, the shakes, those types of things would be good. But those are great questions. We try berries and oatmeal. Only problem with having the berries and the oatmeal for like a breakfast, especially if your kiddo is struggling with focus or any sort of hyperactivity, is that meal is going to set them up to come up and crash, and it doesn't give them enough dopamine, so then they can't focus. They'll feel happy for as long as they're up, but their brain will crash. That front brain really likes protein. So for that breakfast, I would say the berries and some low glycemic, low sugar oatmeal, and then turkey bacon or turkey sausage or chicken sausage, or something along those lines. If they can tolerate like a boiled egg, something like that would be more ideal. Yes, no problem. Okay, jerky, I'll have to check out. Yeah, please. The bar is 20% off right now. And I think I put the link at the top of here. And it's exactly, that's why I do food the way that I do. It's all about hormones and brain performance. That's why I do my meal plans the way that I do. Absolutely, no problem, kid. Yes, you ladies are very welcome. Everybody is having the same problem, whether they realize it or not, is the issue. But I think the jerky that I like, because there's some great ones, just hop on Amazon these days, and then you could put in a turkey jerky, and you're looking at nitrite-free. But I think the jerky, which is a turkey jerky, we really like that one, and that one's nitrite-free. There's another one, Vermont something or other. I'm having a problem with name finding, but Vermont is another one that I like. And ostrums are ones that are actually made with, some of them are ostrich meat and some of them aren't. But these are really clean, because jerkies are not all created equal, and some of them are really high. Think jerky. Yes. That one's a good one. It tastes good. Now that one has a little bit more of a chew to it. Chomps. A lot of my parents like the chomps. And then Tradisia is saying Trader Joe's has some good ones. I haven't been in a store in so long, so I keep ordering things on Amazon, or people keep bringing it to my house. So, but yes, I'm sure Trader Joe's has some good ones as well. So good. I'm glad this spoke to you. If you have other questions, please put them underneath this video. I will go ahead and wrap. And like I said, this video will be up. Please go back and look at the connection between disordered eating disorders, obesity, and the ADHD executive functioning piece of things. And I will talk more before October is over about ADHD and executive functioning. So yes, and Chomps is at Trader Joe's, and that's a good one. So good. All right, I will stop talking. You have a wonderful Sunday evening. And like I said, any questions, please reach out. The Crave Detox Lifestyle Program is 50% off until Halloween. So that is the meal plan 2 that I've been talking about. All right, you guys take care.